I think realistically, man, we have to understand that there was a white-black binary, sort of like, to be honest, a pre-existing race war in America when Asians arrived in large numbers post-1970. And you can fit into it or not fit into it, but I'm never going to tell somebody to feel bad about not thinking about it, because on the right side, they're like, man, I'm not saying history's perfect, but I'm trying to move forward. I'm sick of the fighting.
And of course you're trying to move forward. Look at you. You're in the position of being a white man, so of course you want to move forward and forget about all this stuff.
Right, and then the white guy, he has one of two reactions. Yes, I'm either an upper middle class or rich white man, so be it. Or I'm just a trucker. I mean, what you mean white privilege? I got to drive these trucks to get my paycheck and work hard. Maybe it's true when I turn on the radio in my truck, I get to turn it on to like my shows that support me. But
man, let me tell you, man, I'm Theo Vaughn, so I'm just trying to live, man. That's how Theo Vaughn is like the typical like non-privileged white guy.
I will say the one.
I grew up in my neighborhood. We didn't have a lot of diversity in my neighborhood. Diversity is always people's talking about it. And we didn't have it. You know, my neighborhood was poor black, poor white. That was our neighborhood, you know? So I didn't feel any white privilege. I know some people had it, man, you know? I knew some motherfuckers with sweaters. But I was 2 tank tops in the winter, okay? And I just didn't feel it, you know? I wish I'd have had some white privilege, dude. Sign me up. But I didn't have it, man. It was just poor black kids, poor white kids, man. And my poor black friends would always be like, man, look what you did to us. And I'm like, dude, do you think I would do all that shit to y'all and then move right next door, bro? Now, we gonna split this plum or not, dog? We're in this together, man.
Yeah.
It was hectic sometimes. Fighting with black kids is tough. I don't know if you ever fought a bunch of black dudes, but they win. They win, dude. Dude, I got jumped one time after a football game by 5 black dudes. I don't know if you ever fought 5 black dudes at night. Just imagine you're fighting 5 black dudes, right? Now close your eyes. Now how many black dudes are you fighting? As many as your imagination can hold.
That's fucked up. That's fucked up. Yo, I knew he was getting it.
And white kids were horrible too, man. It was just in poverty. It's just that's what's going on, man. And if you're a black guy and you feel like that's racially insensitive, then imagine you fighting 5 white dudes in a cloud.
Come on, man.
Like, damn, this cloud is impressive. And accurate.
Next clip is about affirmative action. Do they believe it's good, bad, a scam, or something else?
Plaintiffs challenging affirmative action rules, there are Asian Americans who are banding together to do that.
I think of affirmative action as a scam. It's an excuse to make race-based hiring decisions. And I think that that's wrong. And I think that everything should be based on merit.
The students that are picked by affirmative action are top-tier students.
Yeah.
They're not like some D+ students that are getting picked just based on race. They already are performing at a very top level themselves and proven themselves to be picked.
Despite systemic barriers. I think to a reasonable extent, you could say, okay, if someone grew up in like total poverty and they didn't have the same opportunities, then you can lower the standard a little bit. What I would still say is I think there has to be some proof still of capability. Right now, there's a left-wing movement to remove SAT and standardized testing. So in my opinion, sure, the SAT may not be a perfect test. I think it's decent. That is what actually levels the playing field, is saying we have to take the same test. It doesn't matter what your teacher, how hard they grade, you pay them off, private school education, you know, like that's the environment where it's like totally even.
Sure, it's one way to measure intelligence, but that's also assuming that intelligence can only be assessed in one way.
Andrew, the affirmative action debate is a classic one that I actually think is gaining traction in 2022, moving into 2023. Asian Americans, I see them super split on this issue. And I really think it just comes down to the implementation. Like, listen, any system you pick, it's just like any coach. If you run an offensive forward system, you run a defensive forward system in the NBA, there's always pros and cons.
Certain players are going to get utilized more than others in certain offensive schemes.
Certain players are going to get screwed even if they're good players, but they just don't fit the scheme that they're running, right? Yeah. So that's the tough thing about society in 2022. Like, there are going to be winners and losers. I do think that regardless of the scheme you pick, you can take some steps to mitigate the downsides of given scheme with you know, execution and some analysis.
Hey, you know, guys, I like to look at proposals and I like to hear plans. If affirmative action is in a roundabout way going to hurt some Asian students, or, you know, some other people are going to take their spots, what are the other Asian students going to get? I'd just like to see the proposal. I'm not, you know, I think that ultimately a lot of smart people are going to have to make a hard decision. And like we said, it's not going to make everybody happy. It's going to offend someone. But I'm just saying, what's the trade?
I do think making it more based around socioeconomic status than just pure racial bloodlines, there could be a pretty good case for that. And it will still help marginalized, disenfranchised communities a lot to get the extra help that they deserve due to historical injustices.
And by the
India to work in the Silicon Valley tech industry using H-1B visas. Under H-1Bs, employers can hire foreign workers who have specific skills, and they generally qualify for a permanent green card within a year or two, but not if you come from India.
We all have applied for a green card, and it has been approved. Only thing is that we need to wait 150 years to get a green card. It's been approved.
150 years.
150 years. I'll be dead. I'll be dead by the time, you know, we see a green card.
That's because there's a cap on the number of skills-based green cards that can be issued to any one country of origin. And there are so many workers from India that getting one has become a practical impossibility. The workers protested in front of the San Jose home of Representative Zoe Lofgren, demanding that she fulfill a promise to bring a bill to the House floor for a vote. H.R. 3648 would remove national origin as a consideration for getting a skilled worker green card.
What we are fighting for is for basic equality. You know, treat us based on what skills we bring to this nation and not necessarily based on where we were born.
That's vital to the protesters because with H-1B visas, workers who lose their job for any reason have only 2 months to find a new employer who's willing to apply for a new H-1B on their behalf.
You know, there will be layoffs and suddenly you are lost. You know, you have 60 days to find another job and stay in the U.S., otherwise you become illegal.
I believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think we should be treat people according to their skills and their integrity, and that's it.
Anybody that looks like me, you don't deserve anything. This idea you walk around with, that you deserve certain things. You don't deserve a single fucking thing. Your parents, our parents who came here literally with $6 didn't get here because they thought anybody owed them dick. They came over here because they worked, because they were the best of the fucking best. That's how they got here. Then they came here with $6 in a country where a language they didn't understand and a culture they didn't understand, and they built from fucking nothing because they knew I don't deserve shit. I get what I earn, I eat what I kill. How the fuck we lost that so quickly disgusts me, and we need to cut that shit the fuck out. You don't deserve shit. Go get it. Go be great, like your fucking parents who are hopefully still walking around and looking at you every day. That's all I need to say.
This is not how we need to be treated, how we deserve to be treated. So like, I think in terms of involvement, there will be a higher involvement of Asian Americans. And also just the mere fact that we had Asian American representation, whether it's Kamala or Andrew Yang just even running, that shows people that, hey, maybe that could be me.
Yeah, I'm allowed. I think that one of the biggest things that representation does is it says, I'm allowed to do that because I see someone that looks like me do that.
Yeah. Wow, David, to me, I think it just all comes back to assimilation. This whole conversation, this whole video, because first of all, I think everybody agrees you want to see more people like you in politics because your interests are going to get represented better. Maybe not fully, but better, right? But you know what has to happen is that people have to assimilate into the political structure, the existing political structure. Just like if you want to see more Asians in C-suite in the corporate ladder, Asians got to climb that ladder because we're not bigger than the structure and we're not going to change the structure. So you need those pioneers, kind of like an Andrew Yang, or if you want to say Kamala Harris, to make it there to be those representatives in some way, and then little by little, more and more will assimilate and climb the ladders and then become more powerful, and we'll be more.
I actually think it's far more likely that Asians just continue to run the economic assimilation plan where we're contributing to capitalism, working within capitalism, offering value, obviously demanding monetary compensation for that value, whether that's labor or work or product or services or connections or brain thinking or whatever that we're adding to the pie. I think, honestly, that's more realistic. I don't really see a super strong political future because look at all the Asians here. They don't even agree. Like some people are far left, some people are far right, some people are moderate on either side, some people are coming out of left field already. So it's like, what do you mean?
But last question. We're seeing more Asians join politics. Politics is becoming more and more diverse. So do you think, are you hopeful, are you bullish that Asian interests are going to be represented a little bit more and more with each person?
Yeah, I do think so. Both, whether the politicians are on the left or the right, to be honest, because they'll just be held to more of an Asian constituency and obviously have those life experiences to more relate to that group. But honestly, yeah, right now, even from this whole Vice debate, and I see this a lot on Jubilee and I see this a lot on The Cut, I just see Asians who are still kind of like at least 80% parroting more like a mainstream talking point on the left or the right. I still haven't seen like a hyper unique Asian perspective yet in my.
Most people are aware there was a genocide of Native Americans. Sure. But most people are not aware that most of it was due to disease.
Right.
When I had explained that to someone that it was 90% of the people were killed by smallpox, they were like, what?
And it was purposely introduced disease, correct?
I don't believe so.
Oh, it just came with people?
Yeah, it just came with people.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't think they really understood how to introduce diseases back then. Like the idea that they thought that you could have it on a blanket and introduce it. I don't think that's true. I think
interesting.
Let's find that out. I believe that myth has been busted. But they know now that that's what killed off the Mayans.
Yeah.
Like, because there was always this big mystery. Like, where'd the Mayans go?
Where did these people go?
They had this incredible civilization, so complex. And mimicked the cosmos and their architecture. There's no evidence that the scheme worked.
Oh, this is regarding the blanket.
Infection of the blankets was apparently old, so no one could catch smallpox from the blankets. Besides, the Indians just had smallpox. Smallpox had reached Fort Pitt and had come from Indians, and anyone susceptible to smallpox had already had it. Yeah, I think it was just a thing that people had, and they brought it over, and then it killed everybody. It also killed everybody in the Amazon.
And people here in the Americas had no tolerance to it, right? Because they hadn't evolved alongside the disease, which had evolved over thousands of years or millions of years. Yeah.
They had no natural immunity to it.
Right.
And then that's also what they believe was responsible for decimating the Amazon. Like, they think the Amazon had millions of people.
The Incans and the Mayans and all those things.
All those people.
I didn't realize that. That's really interesting. Yeah.
The really wild stuff that's being done in the Amazon is LIDAR.
Oh, I know.
Where they're finding all this evidence of these ancient structures that were just overcome by the jungle.
Have you seen the Honduran lost city of the monkey god?
Yes.
So great. There's a legit full civilization in Honduras, like a bustling city that they found in LIDAR 2 or 3 years ago, using LIDAR 2 or 3 years ago.
Just empty.
Empty. But like a full scale city, not like a village or a town, like tens of thousands. Yeah, look at that.
Fucking wild.
Yeah.
But it totally makes sense, man. If you bring in smallpox, I mean, smallpox kills like 90% of the people that get it.
Right.
So it just fucking decimated the populations of these places where these European settlers made through. That's the whole story behind the lost city of Z, you know.
Plague is an infectious disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. It mainly affects rodents and spreads by way of insects. Because of these insect carriers, plague has been passed on to humans with devastating consequences. 3 major plague pandemics have occurred in human history. And while they occurred centuries apart, they shared similar traits that paved the way for the spread of disease. One cause of plague pandemics was the rise of international trade. Trade routes connected once isolated communities and created large economic networks. But by facilitating the movement of goods between communities, trade routes also facilitated the movement of germs. International trade was an impetus for the first plague pandemic on record, the Plague of Justinian. In the 6th century, outbreaks began in Egypt, and thanks to land and sea trade routes, they spread throughout the Byzantine Empire. Named after the emperor at the time, the plague of Justinian is estimated to have wiped out about half of Europe's population. This was particularly evident in the second and most infamous plague pandemic. In the 14th century, Europe was experiencing an economic and population boom, especially in cities. Proper waste management did not exist at the time, making cities vulnerable to disease. After trade routes brought plague from Asia, where it killed millions in China and the Middle East, the disease wiped out about a third of Europe's population, earning itself the moniker, the Black Death. What also aided in the transmission of the disease was the lack of medical knowledge. For most of human history, the cause of illnesses, germs, was unknown, making sicknesses like the plague a mystery. This lack of knowledge drove the spread of disease as recently as the 19th century. Outbreaks in northwest India eventually reached major port cities in China. In just over a century, plague was exported throughout the globe and caused outbreaks in every continent except Antarctica, making it the most widespread pandemic in history. This plague pandemic, however, was the last. In 1894, scientists discovered the bacteria behind the plague outbreaks. Their discovery helped further developments in microbiology, medicine, urban planning, and sanitation methods, which led to the treatment and prevention of the disease.
Can I say this about science?
You can say anything you want about. Some of my best friends are scientists.
And I love them, and they do such good work, but they are going to kill us all.
Atomic bomb, baby, atomic bomb.
Atomic bomb, because they're still people. So you have the atomic bomb, and if you cut the atom this way, it can power the world with electricity. And if you cut it that way, it can blow everything up. Guess which one we tried first? Like, that's just who we are. A couple of years ago, there was the 1918, remember the last pandemic, right?
Sure.
So a bunch of scientists...
Yes, I've read up.
I was there. Look at my beard. 1918, they had a sample that I guess had been in the whatever permafrost lab in the 1918. So the idea was they were going to reanimate it so that they could study it. The 1918 pandemic flew. They had a little sample of it, and it hadn't been a scourge in the earth for 100 years. And they thought to themselves, what if we just, I don't know, woke it up? And nobody in the room was like, no, let's not do that. But they did that. Here's how I believe the world ends. And I say this to you in sincerity. Okay. It does not end. We are a screwed up world. There's racism, income inequality, fascism, authoritarianism. There are all these horrible, horrible things. Natural resources that run down. That'll all be fine. The world ends. The last words man utters are somewhere in a lab. A guy goes, it worked.
Jon Stewart got lots of laughs, but he's also getting some flack for what he said about the Wuhan COVID lab leak theory. However, accidents have happened at high-security labs before, right here in the United States. Stephen Fabian has details.
Jon Stewart is taking a lot of heat for his appearance this week with Stephen Colbert. He made it clear he believes that the COVID-19 virus leaked from the lab in Wuhan, China.
How did this happen? And they're like, a pangolin kissed a turtle? And you're like, no.
What do you mean by that? Do you mean like perhaps there's a chance that this was created in a lab, there's an investigation?
A chance?
Well,
oh my God. A Washington Post columnist blasted Stewart. He should shut up and stick to the thing that got him famous in the first place.
Lab leak theory is gaining growing support. One reason is that accidents involving dangerous viruses have happened in labs before. In fact, it happened right here in the United States.
A lab at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill studies coronaviruses just like the lab in Wuhan, China. There have been 6 accidents with lab-created coronaviruses since 2015, according to documents obtained by ProPublica.
That laboratory is engaged in the production of new and novel kinds of coronaviruses that, if they were released from the lab, are very unpredictable.
Biosafety expert Edward Hammond says an accident happened just last year.
The mouse bit a researcher, and the mouse had been infected with a genetically engineered variety of the COVID virus.
How concerned should Americans be about another pandemic breaking out because of a lab leak?
There will be accidents, and those accidents are potentially catastrophic.
I care about politicians. I care about who voted for them. I just don't care about politics.
But they could make policies.
I know. They're making policies that the people who elected them wanted them to make. So I'd turn around and I'd say, you have to understand the consequences of decisions and the consequences of the absence of decisions. Understand what science is and how and why it works. And the cost to you of ignoring that. They still want this to happen? That's what a free democracy does. I will not beat a politician over the head if they're duly elected by whatever process it is. In a free country, I won't do it.
So you wouldn't like to sit across a chair from Scott Pruitt?
I'm going to sit across the TV screen and make my case to the electorate. Then they vote for whoever they want in the next election cycle. Republican, Democrat, I don't care. I want them to be informed.
The House has faced harsh criticism for deporting thousands of Haitian migrants back to Haiti, a country in extreme turmoil. In recent months, Haiti's endured the assassination of its president and a devastating earthquake. Poverty is widespread. Food is hard to find. NBC's Jacob Soboroff went to Haiti to witness the dire situation on the ground that's driving Haitians to seek refuge in the United States.
Across Haiti's capital city, a landscape of despair, one that extends far beyond Port-au-Prince.
We're on our way to La Caille, the area that was devastated by the recent earthquake here. We're going to board a plane operated by the World Food Program. They're doing food and cash distributions. This is it.
We flew with Pierre Honorat, the organization's country director in Haiti. When we arrived, we drove towards a remote commune called Acan, an area that faced extreme poverty even before the quake due to a lack of jobs in the area.
Here you have the most vulnerable among very vulnerable people. And you need to properly identify who they are.
They might be starving, literally.
Exactly.
This is one of their food distribution sites. Pierre's leading us into it right now.
We met several women waiting in line, including the single mom of 4 kids.
Can you tell me what life is like here?
This is not a great place.
Do you know anybody who's left, anybody who's leaving Haiti?
Yes, there are a lot of people leaving.
Hunger isn't the only life-threatening reality for Haitians.
Some areas are really like war zone. You don't go there anymore.
It's a war zone.
It's really a war zone.
We flew back to Port-au-Prince on a UN chopper, now used to avoid violence in addition to delivering aid. On the city's streets, you understand why.
We're making our way through Port-au-Prince, and much of the city right now is controlled by violent gangs. We're heading to a clinic run by Doctors Without Borders. They say they're seeing an uptick in violence.
It's trauma hospital.
Half of the patients who arrive here have life-threatening gunshot wounds, often from high-power firearms.
The patient that's in this bed inside this room right now is a victim of gun violence.
Haitian trauma surgeon Xavier Garnizan tends to the neediest patients.
How many of the people that you meet as patients do you think would consider leaving Haiti for another country, including the United States?
Maybe 90%.
90%? Why so high?
Violence, poverty.
And those are the patients you treat every day?
Yep.
Victims of gun violence?
Yep.
Stabbings?
What?
Car accidents because they have to move from one place to another due to violence in their community?
Mm-hmm.
And even you as a doctor, is it fair to say that you might think about one day leaving Haiti because of the situation here?
Yes, I do, because at the end, I got dreams too. I want a better life too. I don't need to be rich, I don't need that. But I need to have enough to feed my family.
There's enormous pressure for you as well.
Yeah.
It's your guys' problem out there. You guys don't like immigrants because you don't have Mexicans.
That's true.
I mean this sincerely. There is like, even the conservatives, they're like, oh, I'll stop the border. They don't mind the ones that got in. Notice they're not going send them back. They're like, these ones are great, and we love everything that they're doing, and they're awesome, great time, amazing amount of fun, but we're out of limit. Yeah. The best immigrant group ever in the history of the world.
Our stereotype of Polish people is yours for Mexicans.
That they're hardworking,
hardworking,
the
and they'll do it
most
for cheap.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, good margaritas, families,
great tacos. They'll drink a lot.
I'm Los Angeles. I'm from West LA. I have a lot of family from East LA though, and if you guys don't know, East LA is known for like gang violence and drugs and guns, and now it's known for like white ladies that sell crystals. So it's changed a lot. And my uncle Saul, who lives out there, hardcore cholo from like the 90s. Like he's been in gangs, like he's been shot, he's been stabbed. Like I'm pretty sure he's never had birthday cake. Like he's had a rough life. He's hard, dude. And he loves East LA, but here's the thing, he just got out of jail, and he's been in jail for so long that he doesn't know what gentrification is. But he still loves East LA and everything that comes to it. He said, hey, dog, you gotta come out to East Los, dog. We got this new restaurant. It's cute as fuck. It's $20 a plate, but it's not about the food. It's about the ambiance. And they got these drinks, right? It's half champagne, half orange juice. They call it mimosa. And it's bottomless, dog. You know what that means? It's forever, dude. Like, it just keeps coming. And like my dead homies, they just keep coming. I was like, dude, are you just talking about brunch? He's like, I'll die for brunch, dog. I don't give a fuck, fool. Get Sunday Fun Day blasted on my neck. These pancakes are tasty, dude. I stand these pancakes, dog.
The challenge we're seeing in Mexico right now is that the air quotes, good cartel.
Anticipate that happening with Mexico?
Mexico is, to be perfectly honest, really early in this process. The challenge we're seeing in Mexico right now is that the air quotes, good cartel, the one that saw drugs as a business, is being broken up. If you remember El Chapo.
That's the good cartel?
Yeah, remember El Chapo, Sinaloa cartel?
Yeah.
He thought of himself as a Korean conglomerate president. So it's like, we smuggle drugs. That's our business. You don't mess with things that mess with the business. So you don't trip the old lady. You don't steal her purse. You don't shoot at the cops. These are people who live where we operate. We want them to be on our side. So maybe even throw a party every once in a while. You focus on the business. We got El Chapo. We removed him from circulation. The guy who died or got captured yesterday was his son, one of the Los Chapitos. And his cartel, as a result, is fracturing because his leadership's gone. The replacement cartel is Jalisco New Generation. They're led by a former Mexican military officer who thinks that rather than don't shit where you sleep so that the people on your side, whenever you move into a town, you shoot it up. You do kick over the old lady. You do take her purse. You make the people scared of you. That's the point of this. Drug running is a side gig. We are here to be powerful. And drug running is just one of the ways we make that happen. And he has taken the fight to every cartel and the Mexican government. And they're in the process of trying to break into the United States.
Break in what? Economically?
Yeah. El Chapo and the Sinaloa became the largest drug trafficking organization in America under the Obama administration. And one of the reasons our birth rate went down so far so fast is they basically either co-opted or killed American gangs. So they killed the people who were doing the killing. Not a lot of Americans got killed after that. All of the other cartels control the access points to the United States, but Jalisco New Generation now is challenging every single one of them, trying to break through. And if they do, and they bring their business acumen, if you will, north of the border, they're going to start killing white chicks named Sheila in Phoenix, and then we're going to have a very different conversation in this country about the drug war and about trade with Mexico.
So when you say that they've killed the gangs, like in what way? Because that is an interesting thing that you don't hear a lot about American gangs anymore.
Well, that's because they're not there to the same degree. So the Sinaloa, they co-opted the Hispanic gangs, especially the Mexican gangs, because there wasn't a language barrier there. And they really targeted and gutted a lot of the African-American gangs. They took over drug smuggling and distribution from them to deny them income, and then they just shot a lot of people.
And when did this take place?
That happened during the 2000s. It was pretty much completed by the time we got to 2013.
But we weren't really this narrative didn't really go around. This is not something that I've heard before.
Well, yeah, look at the murder.
It's making sense
Yeah,
when you're saying it.
Look at the violent crime rates in the United States. They've been trending down really significantly since about 2004. And the drop from 2004 to roughly 2014 was amazing. That's largely Sinaloa.
So they have silently sort of invaded and taken over the distribution and taken over the gang activities.
Right, and this is El Chapo's cartel that is now getting broken up. And as soon as you have more players more violence is going to happen, especially against one another. And that's one of the reasons that the murder rate in Mexico has skyrocketed in the last 3 years.
Business conference is back in town.
The 4-day event brings together business and political leaders to highlight the cultural and economic contributions of the nation's Latinos.
I am proud to be an American. I'm proud to be a Latino. Equity and inclusion. This is about business.
Well, the conference kicked off today by releasing new research that shows just how important Latinos are to the U.S. economy. Sergio Flores with NBC7 and Telemundo 20 Responds explains the findings.
Well, I have a copy of the report right here. And you know what really stands out to me is that Latinos in the United States are growing, and not just in population, but in their desire to achieve much more for their families than they did just 10 years ago.
The fish tacos ready?
A quick lunch break for attorney Andrew Skelton in downtown San Diego. Don't let the name throw you off, though. He's a Latino, half Dutch, half Mexican.
If I was in a Mexican high school, it would say in my picture, Andrés Eduardo Skelton del Bosque.
Andrew says he owes much of his success to his family, farm workers who one summer took him out to work in the fields in California's Central Valley. Boot camp for life, as he calls it.
That work ethic and the desire to do as much as possible, yes, that absolutely translates into my life as a professional.
The attorney's story is a familiar one among Latinos at the Latitude Business Conference in San Diego.
And taking more and more responsibility, not taking anything away from anybody, but taking more and more responsibility of what happens in our economy.
And part of the bigger story told by the 2024 Latino GDP report. It serves as a talking point, a window into the role of the U.S. Latino in our country's economy. The report marks the Latino gross domestic product at $3.6 trillion. Meaning, if U.S. Latinos were a country, they'd be the 5th largest economy in the world. From 2017 to 2022, the Latino economy grew more than twice as fast as non-Latinos. The report says there are 3 main reasons for this. One is population. The Latino population is growing almost 5 times faster, outpacing non-Latinos by about 1 million people from 2010 to 2021. Another factor is a higher labor force participation among Latinos 16 years or older. Andrew thinks he knows why this is.
And Latinos don't start off with the same resources as other populations. And so they have to work harder to get ahead. But that's part of the Latino work ethic is, yeah, if you give me a chance to work for it, I'm going to work for it and I'm going to get it.
And the final driver is education. According to their report, a higher percentage of Latinos have a bachelor's degree or higher than they did even 10 years ago.
It just shows that people really want to get that education that their parents couldn't get.
Frida Gonzalez is a student at SDSU. She says her immigrant parents worked hard for her to get a degree, just like so many of her Latino classmates and younger family members.
They're also achieving their own dreams, but they're also achieving their parents' dreams too at the same time.
Okay, so the report also pointed to significant positive influences by the Latino community in states such as California, Texas, and Florida, for example. But it also pointed to what it's calling a surprising surge in states such as the Dakotas, Maine, and New Hampshire, among others.
I think what you see in the most clearly, I think, in the academic world, are people who don't think that this country is a great country. One example of a colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard, after 9/11, put an American flag on his car, and his colleagues said, "What is that for?" When I visited Berkeley in the aftermath of 9/11, when there were flags everywhere, I did not see one flag on the Berkeley campus on any of those expensive houses. When I was coming back from Berkeley, the first American flag I saw was in a low-income black neighborhood in Oakland. These are people who consider themselves citizens of the world. And that the rest of us are so lucky to have them here to change America.
National crisis that really requires federal intervention that local government is being asked to subsidize. Local government is not designed or built to handle such a crisis.
Definitely both a humanitarian crisis for the migrants that are arriving, and it is creating a fiscal crisis for the city.
I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
The present migrant crisis is quite unprecedented.
both in scale, in the diversity of the nationalities that are coming to the border, and the impact it's having not only on the border states, but in the states and cities inside the country.
I think it's at this point politically unsustainable for the Biden administration to maintain this unlimited flow into what's essentially a welfare state network of cities like New York and Denver and Chicago.
So how long can cities withstand the recent surge of migrants? And what do they need to end the crisis?
We have to first acknowledge that there is a crisis, because if you don't acknowledge a crisis, you can't be in a crisis mode. We have to be in a crisis mode.
And this crisis is expensive. In 2018, New York City spent roughly $258 million to fund its immigration services, adjusted for inflation. By fiscal year 2023, the city had spent $1.47 billion servicing those seeking asylum. The city of Chicago spent over $194 million on its new arrivals mission since October 2022. Denver is estimated to have spent between $36.3 million to $39.1 million on migrant support services in 2023.
The three biggest items for expenses for new arrivals is housing, education, and healthcare. And they're all three high-ticket items.
The idea that we could have a generous system of welfare benefits from health to education and so on, and allow the entire world to access those benefits is just mathematically impossible. So we're starting to see the math not adding up in state after state.
The sheer volume of newly arrived migrants is a major reason behind the city's struggles. In fiscal year 2022, just over 817,000 new cases were filed in immigration courts across the U.S. That number exploded to nearly 1.5 million new cases the following fiscal year. The particular background of current migrants also plays a role.
The secret sauce of migration has worked in the past is that people would come and they would not depend on the city and state for settling them. They would depend on their social networks. It seems in this case, many of the people coming in are coming where there are not such inbuilt connections. Venezuelans which is the largest source of a nationality of the new migrants. It's particularly true that they don't have inbuilt connections. They're not Venezuelan communities that are long standing. So they therefore, in the absence of private source of comfort for them, then they become dependent on the states and the cities. And the states and the cities have limited resources.
Although immigration has primarily been an area of federal oversight, experts say there just isn't enough federal funding for cities to work with.
The current level of federal funding provided to state and local governments is a drop in the bucket compared to the need. Congress has provided a very small amount of money of $800 million for a FEMA program for the entire country for last fiscal year to provide assistance to cities in aiding these newcomers.
But cities say this isn't enough. For instance, the $145 million allocated to New York City is less than 10% of what the city spent on migrant services in fiscal year 2023.
This is a whole spectrum of services needed for people who are new to a place, new to a country, new to a city. Everything from finding warm clothes for them, to finding jobs for them, to finding shelter for them. These are complicated issues to manage. So the city, the state, and the federal government, frankly, was not prepared for it.
Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
So the historians will probably record the current migrant crisis as a chapter of busing migrants. This kind of coordinated, dramatic busing of asylum seekers from the border to the cities inside the countries is completely unprecedented.
Since the first bus of migrants to Washington, D.C., Texas reported it has transported over 100,000 migrants to cities such as New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Denver, and Los Angeles. In 2023, illegal immigration is estimated to have cost Texas taxpayers $13.4 billion. According to the Texas newsroom, the state spent over $148 million busing migrants to sanctuary cities as of January 24, 2024. The Office of the Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, did not respond to CNBC's request for an interview.
The two motives, I think, behind it were, one, simply necessity that Texas doesn't have the resources to cope with 150,000 people a day being released into the state. It's a big state, it's a reasonably wealthy state, but they just simply don't have the schools, the hospitals, the roads, the housing to cope with that kind of influx.
The staggering new record, more migrants crossed into the U.S. on Monday than any other day in history.
The current crisis of forced displacement is a global phenomenon. There are more people displaced worldwide than ever before, and 1 out of every 5 displaced people is in the Americas.
But there's also pull factors, is that people have come to realize that if they reach the United States border and they seek asylum, then they'll be let in. And then their hearing will not happen for 7 years, during which time they are authorized to work in the United States and they won't be deported. And that has, I think, become a very important magnet.
Sanctuary cities refer to a community with a policy, written or unwritten, that discourages law enforcement from reporting an individual's immigration status unless it involves a serious crime.
The United States is, $34 trillion in the hole and growing at over $1 trillion a year of deficit. We do at least print money and we can make more of it. Cities and states, on the other hand, are not so blessed. Lots of cities like Chicago, New York are getting into some pretty serious debt. What tends to happen is there's a snowball effect. The city will turn to the state and ask for a bailout, and then the state will turn to the federal government and ask for a bailout. So the solvency of our big cities and our states is definitely in question.
For some experts, containing the flow of immigration is vital in solving the current crisis.
The busing from Texas is a tiny, tiny fraction of the number of people who are going to cities in the rest of the country.
We have to certainly limit the number of asylum seekers who come to the border.
Liquidity. And this saved the American financial system.
And this didn't just save the American financial system, it saved the financial system of the world. More than half of the liquidity provision to large banks in the United States was to European banks in the United States. And then on top of that, the Fed lent $4.5 trillion to European and Asian central banks, who indirectly provided dollars to their local banks in Europe and in Japan.
And this, says Adam Tooze, is the key to understanding the crash of '08. A global financial crisis because of global financial interconnectedness. A crisis that would have been far worse had the U.S. not dispensed dollars worldwide.
Okay, so thanks for making that point. But where do we go? Colton, what would you say to this guy? Or what do you think I should have said to him?
So I think you had the unique experience of actually being able to talk to him, and you said you could genuinely tell that he's a good guy. I assume you believe his whole story, that he did have a family back home, and obviously he is risking his life. So he thinks at the very least that even though it is a bad idea, as Kamala Harris said, his life back there and his family's life back there was even worse. So I think that I would have tried to help him. So I would say to him, I have a lot of respect to you, for you, and you deserve my help. I grew up in the United States. That was just by luck. I didn't get myself here. I didn't do anything. I didn't work hard to get here. Yeah. So why should this guy who did work hard to just get to the border, he worked really hard just to get to the border. I didn't work at all.
He worked harder to get to the United States than any of the three of us did, than you guys either. What'd you guys? You took a plane over here. You know what I mean? He worked harder to get here than any of us did, actually, if you think about it. But hang on, but that doesn't help. It's whoa, I have respect. So, Jose Manuel, I have respect for you. Whoa, okay, but that doesn't do anything. What do we do? Right? What's the difference between I have respect for you or Donald Trump saying, go home. Go home, man. Jose Manuel, you need to go home because it's not just you, it's you and you and you and you and so many tens and hundreds of thousands of other people and millions of other people. It's you really need to just stop and go home. And what's the difference between Donald Trump saying it and Kamala Harris? It's like, dude, go home. And essentially what I was saying to him was, I'm going to give you a little help because we met and it's good. I'm going to give you a little help to give it a try. But if it doesn't work, you really need to go home. Right? So like, how's that different than, I don't know, Donald Trump? Donald Trump's just a little more vulgar and mean about it. But can I ask the two of you that? Like, what would you say to this guy?
Why the U.S.?
Huh? What's that?
Why the U.S.?
Yeah, well, there's really nowhere else that he would.
Why not another country?
Like he could go to, if you think about Honduras, yeah, he might end up staying in Mexico.
Stay in Mexico.
Mexico's doing.
Or other countries nearby, like Belize.
Well,
in Central America.
Yeah, Belize would be hard. Guatemala, El Salvador, yeah, that's not going to work. Panama's economy is struggling. You could go to Colombia, be a little better off. But okay, so you'd say why the U.S.?
Maybe try to find like a place where, because you told me he speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
So maybe try to find a place that only people speak Spanish, and then he can.
He was there. He was in Mexico.
But like, then find a job or find something he would be comfortable with to reach that level where he can finally go to the U.S. legally. And
he's never going to get to the U.S. legally, dude. There's no way. Dude, go back to time-wise. This guy could apply for a work permit in the United States. He could apply, and his great-great-grandchild might actually get accepted.
Like, you know that giving him money will obviously, you said you gave him money, and then other people right after him came. So you kind of subconsciously know that it wasn't really the good idea, because now other people are going to come to you or other like tourists.
Yeah, but I could say no to other people. That wasn't the issue. The issue really was the complication of like, dude, first off, what do I think about the fact right now of just like, did this guy, it's very complicated. The issue is, we're in a real conundrum, are we not? Right now with the fact that that so many people like him in different parts of the world, but especially in Latin America, but other parts of the world who then go to Latin America, like Chinese. There are so many Chinese immigrants that find their way to Ecuador because Chinese can get to Ecuador without a visa. And then once you get to Ecuador without a visa and you have enough money, then you go north to get to the border of the United States. So what we see, so when I was leaving Mexico, as I'm walking out, here's this big line of people who are waiting to have their paperwork processed. And you know the people like him versus the other people who are applying for asylum because they're with their papers. And I know, like, those are the asylum seekers. Okay? So, in that lineup are, as we were leaving Nogales, there are Africans, there are Haitians, Africans who went to South America, like including, in different countries. I think Africans go to Peru, different places in Africa, right? You go to different countries, but it's mostly West Africans, right? So Nigerians, Ghanaians, and so on, are going to Peru. Chinese go to Ecuador. And so in this lineup of watching people, you have Africans, you have Haitians, you have Chinese, there are Vietnamese, then you have people from all over South America. And the line, it's just going to never stop. It's going to never stop. It's just going to keep going.
In Brazil, where over 600 migrants, mostly from India, Nepal, and Vietnam, are currently facing alarming humanitarian conditions. They remain trapped at Sao Paulo's international airport and are being deprived of basic necessities like food, water, and even blankets to keep warm. The migrants are now anxiously awaiting to leave the airport for the United States as Brazil tightens its immigration rules. Here's our report with more.
At Sao Paulo's Guarulhos International Airport, a tense and tragic story is unfolding. The scene is grim. Families are huddled together in a restricted area with no access to basic necessities like showers, warm clothes, or even enough food and water. Children caught in the crossfire of migration politics also shiver through the Brazilian winter without blankets to keep them warm. The air is thick with uncertainty and desperation as these migrants await a decision that could change their lives forever. Refugee requests, that was double compared to the total in the previous year. In a statement, Brazil's Justice Ministry said that many of these travelers, particularly from Asia, arrive under the guise of seeking asylum but use Brazil as a gateway to the US or Canada. The new policies force migrants without visas to either continue their journey to another country or return to their homeland, effectively shutting down the possibility of finding refuge in Brazil.
So then the question becomes like, okay, what? Do what then?
Yeah, so it's a fine line, and honestly, like, I know we've talked about how hard immigration is, but as you're kind of getting to, it needs to be at least a little bit hard, or else everybody will just pour into the United States. So there's kind of a fine line, because you can't make it too hard, because then we're going to have more and more people like Jose that just continue to suffer where they are. But you can't make it too easy to get into the country, because then everybody would just walk into the country and will be facing a lot of the problems you mentioned.
And of all the people who say, like, yeah, I would leave my home country and I would go somewhere else, on average, 130 to 140 million of them would come to the United States. So it's like, okay, 130, 140 million. Like, that's like, 40% of the population, but still, right? I think we have to put this in perspective.
What I was saying, some of them are going to listen to Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, and some of them are not going to listen and come up. But if we say, hey, everybody come up, everybody will make that trip.
Well, here.
All 130 million or whatever.
Okay, listen, man. If I think about morality and right and wrong, like, as I was talking to him, I'm just thinking, that's so immoral to put that message out there. You know what I mean? And this goes, bro, to your question. It's like,